Chat with a name or two that are one of those names, so that I know they're going to go to their computer.
Pat Richter would be one, and of course Ron Vanderkamp, a very famous quarterback, played for the Vikings, but then John Holman, Steve Underwood, a whole bunch of guys.
Before I go into baseball, right? I got it for the kids that love football. You put your uniform on one day, and you were in California. Now, every year at our event, for the ones that come to our event, we have the captain of Notre Dame, who he was on the field and went to the NFL, and he played for the national championship. So before I go to baseball, give me a football story of you and your team were out in California to play a big game. Where am I going with that? What game is it?
Well, we're playing in the Rose Bowl for the national championship.
It's crazy.
This was January 1st, 1963. January 1st, 1959, the Badgers played. And the night before, most of those guys got caught being bad boys. So our particular team suffered the dire consequence of having to stay in a monastery for 2 weeks before. And we got off to a very, very slow start. I think we were behind 31-10 at one point in time. The game ended up 42-37. We finally got on track. But I blame
the 4 years before, you guys, day in and day out, were in a monastery. Right. Your inclusion in the game. What was your role, both offense or defense?
I was going to be the starting right half.
Okay.
I'd gotten hurt the first game as a sophomore, concussion, so they helped me up with it, and then I started playing me some defense. But then he decided I was going to be the starting right half. But our safety broke his collarbone, so at the very last minute, I got stuck in to play defense. And maybe I'm responsible for that, but I don't know. Who knows? So I played defense in that.
Now that game was your junior year in college, right?
That was my sophomore.
So so your very first year playing in college football, you're playing for the national championship. I got this. In the back of your head, when that game's over, and you're literally the second best team in the United States of America, not a bad label to have. The word baseball is banging around your head, but the key thing is, Rick Reichardt didn't play high school baseball. He was running on what's around the football field, but not over there on the diamond.
But it made sense because, remember, Wisconsin, what do you have in the spring? You've got snow, cold weather. You might have a 12-game high school baseball season. So I think track is a great adjunct on the 30 sport. Conditioning-wise, disciplining 9 yards. This was probably my dad at work, behind the scenes. Who knows?
So when you go over to the baseball program, explain your first season in college baseball. I'd love to get a recap of that, as if you were the announcer talking to Rick Reichardt. Give me the summary of how the first year in college baseball went for you.
Well, of course, being from Wisconsin, being in the Big Ten, you're not playing baseball up there in March and April. So our first road trip is down to Arizona State. Rick Monday, Reggie Jackson, Sal Bando. And of course, I actually started, I think the reason I started because I was the fastest guy on the team. In fact, I think I broke the NCAA record for playing on the bases, according to my coach. But I didn't do very well. I think I didn't get hit for a couple of games. And then the third game of the year, I hit one over the palm trees in center field. And 2 years later, I'd won the Big Ten batting championship 2 years in a row.
How does that's what I'm saying. They say that 10,000 hours, okay, if you were a scientist talking about athletics or other things, 10,000 hours invested in something will make anyone, right, maximize their ability or truly get to be better than the people that don't spend it. There's no 10,000 hours in the numbers that you created. So where... it's a fair question.
I guess I had some natural ability, and I do think the fact that I played in all these different sports gave me the ability to have the mentality to compete, irrespective of what the sport was. And as you know, baseball, having played them all, the acquisitions of skill in that sport, there's nothing like it. You just can't go out and play. You can't go out and play on a girls' softball team if you've never played before. My nephew played at the University of Florida last year, one of the best teams in the country. Having never ever played football in his life, he just couldn't do that with baseball or softball. In fact, he came back after like 5 years in Afghanistan, so he was a vet too, and he still made the teams.
Really?
The subtleties and the nuances of baseball, there's nothing like it.
What position did you pick to play in college ball? Where were you in the outfield?
I think I started at left, but I ended up being in center field.
Because of your speed?
Yeah.
How was the arm?
My arm record is average in one area. Just throwing arm.
Is it?
I did not have a great arm, and I think it was a result of these 2 broken wrists that I had
From
playing
football.
Yeah.
Can you go back, before I go forward, I want to go back to what your thoughts are as a junior in college and the possibility of something being wrong with your kidney. How it could, later, we'll get to it later, but while you were in college, do you think you did something possibly physically?
Well, there's no question I sustained a very nasty back injury, but those kinds of things were the furthest thing from my mind as having some kind of a long-term effect, either affecting me, whether I play any sport or not. But right before I got sick, I probably shouldn't tell this story. We came off a road trip, and there were 2 of us that were just knocking it dead. A guy named Jackie Warner, who was an LK line type player. And we both went to Chicago before we came back to Anaheim, and I said to the scout that signed me, isn't it wonderful that Jackie Warner and I are doing so well? He says, Rick, in a month he'll be out of the league. I said, what are you talking about? Because they're going to get the book on him not being able to hit anything above his waist.
Why they hire scouts?
Yeah. Anyway, well, he struck out about 20 times in a row, got benched. And we came back off this road trip, and he came into the clubhouse one time, sort of a jokester, and he was dressed all in green. And I said, Robin Hood, with your band, just in good taste. And now about 5 minutes in, I'm getting dressed, I'm putting on my uniform, and somebody is pulling the heck out of me in the back. And guess who it was? Jackie Warner. And a week later, guess what? I'm having my kidney removed at the Mayo Clinic. So, he may not have been the ultimate cause, but I think it was football. But this definitely was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Now, before magazine covers come into your life, which is pretty cool, by the way. I mean, there's all kinds of interviews, but not that many magazine covers associated with my subject. What went on for you to become, quote unquote, the Bo Jackson before the Bo Jackson? You were garnering this attention in baseball, but the system was set up that now there's attention on this kid in Wisconsin. The system in baseball was set up. Explain the system which led to a lot of people that are watching this are going to think you're going to be one of the first 2 people in the major league draft. And that Steven Strasburg guy out of California, you're going to be wanted by this team.
Right.
I believe that didn't exist.
There was no draft.
I believe you're the cause of it.
There was no draft. Everybody was, in effect, a free agent. And if you're good enough, they're going to go after you. They're going to pay you some kind of money. But for whatever reason, I sort of broke the bank. I think there was a guy named Bailey that played for the Pirates.
Okay.
Bob Bailey.
Bob Bailey.
He got
Sure.
a lot of money.
Sure. Yeah.
And a few other guys like that. I signed for a lot of money, but I could have gotten a lot more from somebody else.
Was this after your junior year or after
This is
your
after
senior?
my junior year. I gave up my senior year. In fact,
With your father and mother on academics, I got asked that question before I go into athletics.
I think my dad was not real happy that I had signed. I think he would have been more happy had I completed my senior year, but with the way things were going, if that draft was implemented, guess what? I'd have been the first one for somebody getting 50 instead of whatever.
So now it's after your junior year. You've got 3 years in with your education, and you have the attention of every baseball organization in baseball, where this kid has got all these tools and great size.
Right.
So now a couple of teams. This is I ask this a lot of times when a high school athlete comes down to 2 or 3 colleges. How did you pick this college? Who were the 2 or 3 teams? Not 2. I know how we're going to get to 2,
right.
But who were the 2 or 3 teams that you narrowed it down to? And in your brain, you were starting.
Retrospectively, a team that should have been really interested in me was the Chicago Cubs, because it turns out later on they found out I had some night blindness. I hit 21 home runs when you're 15 on a Sunday. That was pointed out by an LA sports writer. He was going to keep it to himself. Yeah, so that would have been a really good situation.
Career, sure.
But it was the Angels, of course, the Yankees, the Phillies, the Red Sox.
Right.
Those were the main teams that were interested in.
And
of course, the Kansas City Athletics were the team that was
I'm
the
getting
most.
to that.
Charlie Finley actually flew to my home.
Charlie Finley
flew to my home.
Flew to you?
Flew to my home and took me out to dinner, and cornered me away from my agent and everything
Charlie
else.
Finley, by the way, if you look it up, in 1972, 73, and 74, the Oakland A's went to the World Series and won each of those 3 years. Before the team went to Oakland, they were in Kansas City. And this was the colorful, flamboyant owner of the A's that really wanted to win. So he wanted this guy so bad, he flew into your town. Did he discuss numbers?
Yes, he did.
Did he really?
He raised Andy by $20,000 in about 5 seconds.
Really?
What he didn't know is that I'd already sort of committed to the Angels like the day before. And sort of being a man of my word. If I had it to do over again, I think I would have done it.
You would have gone with Charlie.
The other thing was the personal service contract, so
right.
the tax implications would have been completely different.
And didn't, because he's so aggressive, so domineering.
He was scary.
Yeah.
He was scary.
And you're young.
There was a bit of mistrust there. Now, he was the guy that wanted me, though, after the White Sox, so let me go when I was a player rep. And that's a decision I think was wrong. Should have been.
Well, also, a tough decision, was to give up football for baseball. There's some that are regretful, and there's some that are...
It wasn't tough for me at all.
No, that wasn't.
It's just when you play a football game and you're in bed for 2 days afterwards, and you're bigger and stronger than everybody else, and you know at the next level these guys are bigger and even stronger. That was
plus your dad's previous association with the Packers, you know more than what other people do. So now, if I hung out with you in high school and I'm talking to you, you got a check in your hands. Now we haven't played, we haven't suited up, but there was a signing. Where did the signing with the Angels occur?
Well, that was in college, but not in high school.
No, but I was saying, if I'm a high school buddy, I'm thinking of my buddy now that he's in college, right?
I don't even remember where it was. Really? I think it might have been KTLA, Gene Autry's radio station. But I know there was a major press conference, and everybody was there. And so I can't remember. I think maybe the Continental Hotel.
All right.
Which, yeah.
So you sign it. You're eventually going to go back home with your folks. The obvious question is, you had to buy a couple of things. You had to buy something besides investing your money. You had to, whether it's a suit, a car. What did you do?
I went on Craigslist. No, I really didn't spend a lot of money. I did buy a sort of a nice car, but nothing really fancy. I'm sort of cheap. I always have been. I don't know where I got that from. I think from my dad's dad was sort of that way. He was also looking for a market. But I never really had been crazy about spending. I did take trips to Europe. I did go back to school. Complete my education. That was all part of the deal too.
You got your degree.
Oh yes.
And your degree is in
psychology and medical science.
Very good.
Yeah.
So now the money's invested, and the kid packs his bags and goes off to his first spring training camp. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All
Palm
right,
Springs.
Palm Springs.
And Ann Margaret, and Nancy Sinatra, and Patty Duke, and Dinah Shore. Oh. And the next year, guess what? We're not in Palm Springs, we're in El Centro. We're in Mexicali.
How did the transition go to a different level of pitching? In all honesty, college baseball is one thing, and you're the talk of the nation, not the state. So now you got to transition into actually the best pitchers from all the colleges in the country. Basically, they're thrown against you. How was that transition for you?
It was tough. It was very difficult. You went from being 470 hitter to maybe 280, 290. And I had some great years, not great years in minor, but good, solid years.
Right.
And like I said, I think I sort of found myself in 1966, but then the kidney thing hit, and then I ended up becoming, not a journeyman player, but a nice solid player for the next 8 years or so.
When your first day in the major leagues, was it because you got called up during the season, or was your first game in the major leagues coming out of spring training with the team?
It was later in the year, like 1964. They brought me up, and I told you some stories about even when I wasn't playing. Those would open my eyes. But when we were playing in those days in Dodger Stadium, Chavez Ravine, so to speak. So hit my first home run there.
That's what I was getting to.
It scraped to the back of the field. I mean, maybe the shortest part of the field, but I just barely made it in.
And Horlem, well-known, great ERA, good pitcher, 20-game winner.
Yeah, no teammate of mine with the White Sox.
Lives in San Antonio.
Right, exactly.
And never wants to leave San Antonio either.
Great guy.
That home run was in Dodger Stadium. So your rookie year in the major leagues, even though you're playing for the Angels, you're playing your games in Dodger Stadium.
Right.
Because they're building something.
Right, and I think the Angels were playing in someplace in Longwoods, I'm not sure exactly.
So the next year when you break spring training, and you you start the season off. You're in a brand new stadium.
Well, 1965, I'm in the minor leagues. So 64 was the year.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the year that the Angels transferred from Hawaii.
Okay.
They played AAA to Seattle.
Okay.
And that's where Bob Lemon and Jimmy Reese were the coaches.
Okay.
So I played most of that year. I actually going to be called up after about 2 months and sprained an ankle. So I waited till the end of the year, 65.
So you got parts of 2 seasons before the Angels had a stadium of their own. I'm getting to opening day, how we started the interview. I started at the end, I'm coming back to it. So the first home game in Angels history in their own stadium. Eli Gerber's on the mound, I know that, and Reichardt's in the lineup. He got the first win. Oh, he got the he got the first win in Angels history.
Maybe not
because
I don't think he was with the team.
When the Angels drafted him, he was in the expansion draft. He was their first choice, and he was their first win, but not their first win at home. I stand corrected. So Reichardt's name's in the lineup. How does the first game go?
It's the first game in Anaheim Stadium. Of course, they have all the attendant celebrations, and Ronald Reagan is there, Walt Disney is there, and Vicky Carr is there, and God knows all these other celebrities. And of course, in the outfield, they have kids, and they also have Miss Stanton, Miss Anaheim, all these very, very attractive young ladies. And of course, I'm single through most of my major league career. And the guy that sort of took me under his wing was Joe Adcock. And he picked out this girl, and I actually started dating her. Now, I'm not going to get into the end of the story, but the thing I remember the most about that day was hitting the home run off of Tommy John and meeting both Ronald Reagan and those are two of the guys that I find more respect than anybody.